it's Michelle from Scrap Secrets, and welcome to the Sunday post for Tilldeathdouscraft Halloween series. This is also going to be part of my Halloween card series. This is card number 4, and we're going to be making this card today using a technique that I've never shown in videos. So we are going to be using 2 different pieces of gessoed watercolor paper. The one on the left is Canson XL, and the one on the right is the Master's Touch watercolor paper. The one on the right we are going to gesso with the black gesso. It took me forever to get this open. I actually had to run it underwater. It was sealed shut. So the one on the left already has some white gesso on it. It was left over from a project that I did with the girls the other day. So I thought that I would paint 2 pieces of watercolor paper. You'll only see one in this part of the video because it's the same thing. So I'm putting a thin coat down, and there is a texture to this paper that's different than the Canson XL watercolor paper. So I don't know if this has anything to do with the way the technique turned out. I should have done it with the same watercolor paper, but just didn't feel like gessoing another one. So on the white gessoed watercolor paper, we're going to be using some Distress crayons from Holtz. First color is Rusty Hinge, and then we're going to use some Spice Marmalade. And then there are 2 Faber Castell gelatos, and I'm going to use an orange and kind of like a melon color, a pinkish orange. And I did each of the gessoed pieces a little bit differently. This one I applied all the colors, then I sprayed it with water, and then took my paintbrush and mixed it together. And all the colors mixed, so you kind of have a kind of gradient effect or all over different colors. I decided to do the black cardstock or the black gessoed piece a little bit differently. I liked the way this turned out, but I thought the colors mixed too much together. So you're going to see this is just the first layer. So I'm bring the paintbrush up and down, and then I am going to actually go in on a diagonal and try to get rid of some of those brush marks. I just wanted to have a really kind of a cool pattern on the background, and I liked the way that looked. So just personal preference. But I'm making sure to cover the whole thing and then putting it to the side to let it dry. And now we're going to work on the black gessoed piece. And you can see those wavy lines in there. The texture of it has a lot more texture than the other cardstock. So now for the black gessoed piece, I am going in using the Rusty Hinge and then spraying it down with water and moving the water around. Now, I don't know if this is because I'm impatient and maybe the gesso wasn't completely dry, but my paintbrush was picking up some of the black, and you'll see that in a little bit. It really wasn't covering the gessoed piece, so I think this was a flawed experiment. I'm just picking up the water there, and then when I clean the brush off, you'll see the black gesso is on the brush. So now I'm going back in with some of that spiced marmalade, and then I'm actually going to spray a little bit of water on the mat, pick it up with my paintbrush, and then do it that way instead of spraying the water onto the gessoed piece because I thought that it was too much water on there. So I'm just going around the edges, and this gives a greater coverage result. It's not fantastic. It's definitely not like the white gessoed piece, but I definitely got more coverage this way. And there you go. You can see to the side a little bit how bad the black gesso got onto the paintbrush. And I'm going in with the orange gelato, and we'll do the same thing. Pick up some water and do this. I've never done this before with black gessoed cardstock watercolor. I use the black gesso for my art journal. It's the only time I've ever used it, so I thought this would be cool with the technique that I wanted to do, and you'll see how this turns out in a minute. So I'm just taking that paintbrush again and just trying to move the color around and just get a good coverage on it. And then I am going to go in with a little bit of, I went in with a little bit of the pink, but not much. Now we're going back over with the spiced marmalade and doing the same thing. We're going to add layers to this. So I was wiping off the black because some of the black gesso was still on the paintbrush. And I'm trying not to put too much water on there, but just enough to get that color to move around. And this piece, the color definitely was on the background more so than the black gessoed piece. And you can see after we finish the layering of the black piece, you'll see that the color on the white gessoed piece is a lot better, is a lot more, it has more coverage. So there I go in with that melon color, just a couple of streaks, and add a little bit of water just to give it a little bit more color. So could have left that step out because you don't really see it in the end, but it's okay. So I'm going to go in again with a little bit of that rusty hinge and add a little bit of that darker rusty tone to the piece. And again, this is just how, what you're happy with. You can go in and you can add colors, you can add layers. I just decided that I thought that after this, it pretty much looked good, and I think that I'm done. So I'm going to go back to the black gessoed piece and go back and add some more color. And I believe that was the Spice Marmalade, and I tried to go in and use less water. It still was showing the black gesso a lot more. So I decided to do the technique that I did with the girls the first time before we had baby wipes or paintbrushes, and just use my fingers. And the girls were like freaking out because they had stuff all over their hands. And you'll see in a minute I show the camera that my fingers are all inky. But this did seem to put it on a little bit better. It got a little bit more of coverage, and I don't know if it's just because it's the second layer or what. So I'm going in with the orange gelato again and doing the exact same thing. So using a different finger to spread it out so as not to contaminate the colors. So this was a long process. It did take me a while to do it. But there we go, the inky fingers. So I'm going to clean everything off, and then I'm going to take this stencil from Kindred Stamps, and I am going to do the baby wipe technique. So I am taping the stencil to the paper and then the stencil to the background, to my work surface. And then I'm just going to take a baby wipe and go, it's just a Target brand baby wipe, and go over the stencil to remove the color. So I wanted it to look like, I originally thought that I was going to do black on this and then just try both black backgrounds, like a black gessoed, a black gesso with orange Distress crayons, and then a black crayon. But then I decided, let's just do orange, colors of orange. So now I'm going through and picking up the ink where the stencil is. So I'm going to the idea is to get the faces on there. Now these faces are teeny tiny, so it was a little difficult to get into all of those spaces, especially the ones on the end that were only partial faces. So I did the best that I could. You'll see the results in a minute, but I had to keep moving the baby wipe because it removes a lot of the color. And you can see in the top right corners that the gesso, it's just that gessoed part. All of the color has been removed. So it's a fairly easy process. I would recommend a larger opening stencil if you were going to do this, because there was a lot of little pieces here. Okay, so I lift it up just to see how it's going and kind of go a couple more places. So for the most part, it came out really good, and you can tell that they're jack-o'-lantern faces. I kind of wanted it to be like this one was if they were in a dark forest, like the movies you see the spooky trees that you just see their eyes and their mouths. That's kind of what I was thinking about for this one. This one definitely does not turn out right. You'll see when it's done. It's really hard to see the faces because it was really not covered well with the orange. So there really wasn't much to lift up. So this one we're going to say is a fail. It was worth trying, and I just don't think that it came out right. If any of you guys have an idea of how to do this, or if you've done something like this with black gesso, leave me a comment down below and let me know how it works, because you can see some of the faces, it just didn't come out as good as the other one. So probably user error. So now we are going to color in the pumpkins, and that's YR09, and that is the darkest color of orange that I'm going to use on this pumpkin, and I'm going in where the hash marks are, so where some of the darkest areas would be, and just filling those in. And I will be using the pumpkin on the left is going to be a darker orange, and the pumpkin on the right is going to be a lighter one. So this is YR07 that I'm now going in with, and just coloring, extending those lines a little bit. Again, I'm not doing anything fancy with my coloring. I definitely am not great with copic colors, but I am just kind of blending the colors out and leaving a center highlight in the pumpkin because it is a round object. So that was the YR09 and the YR07. And now I'm going to be using YR16, which is a lighter color, and just filling that in. I actually use 4 colors on this larger pumpkin, which I don't normally do. I normally do like a 3-color blend, but for some reason I just felt like using a 4th color on this one. So just coloring in most of the areas, filling that in with just that little bit of an exception of right in the middle. And then we're going to go in with a very, very light YR14, I believe this is, and just leaving that center highlight right there, just right in the middle. And blending out a couple other places that I missed the coloring, and just going back over just to make sure everything blends out together. So that is the other pumpkin, and now we are using 2 colors of green, G99 for the stem. This is very small, so, and then BG96, I believe that was. Again, these colors are not something that you need to, I mean, it's not a tried and true color combination. You can use whatever colors you want. This is just the colors that I happen to use. So I swatched them out on the bottom left hand side, and I was just trying to decide what I wanted to use. This is YR04, and we're going to go in and do the same thing that we did with the other pumpkin and go into the areas with the hash marks, the shading where the I almost said pineapple. The pumpkin would be the darkest. So then I'm just going to continue coloring in the pumpkin, and I believe I missed that color. I apologize. Usually that must have been a chow marker, as I didn't put the cap at the top. You can't, they're not on those caps. So this is the YR02, and we're going to color this pumpkin in. I believe this one just has it's just a 3-color blend, I think, with this one. And then we're going to go in with the G05 and G07 to do the stems. And really it's just, again, this is just very basic copic coloring. And we're going to be using N8 on the outside of his eye, where it would be the darkest. And then we're going to go in with an N6 and an N4. And we're going to leave a little white space between that outer part and the inner part, and I'm actually going to use my white gel pen to define that. And I wasn't sure how that was going to look, but I really like the way that it came out. And I believe I also used, yes, I'll use N8 with for his mouth. Or I'm sorry, N6 is down there. It must be N8 that I use. I don't know. I'm sorry, I can't read the markers. I thought leaving the N4. That was N6. Okay, so those are his eyes, and then you'll see me take the white gel pen. There you go. And you can't really see it, but I am going in there and defining that line. So it kind of has the contrast between the outside of the pumpkin, or the pumpkin rind, and then the inside of the pumpkin. So this is the Rabbit Hole Designs stamp set, and I will leave that listed below in the more information section. I can't remember what the name of it is right off the top of my head. And the sentiment is #pumpkin_everything. So I'm going to use my Misty Corners. That's the set that helps you line everything up, and we're going to be using some Distress Oxide and Carved Pumpkin to ink up that sentiment. And we're going to ink it up twice, and you're going to be very, very careful with this. You don't want to press too hard with the oxides or any kind of pigment ink, because it will distort the sentiment. So you see I'm just going over it very gently, and almost everything stamps well. But I am going to ink it up a second time, just because it wasn't as crisp as I thought it should be. So again, just make sure you don't, when you press that over, you don't press too hard, because you don't want the letters to meld together with that. With anything that has any kind of pigment ink in, we'll do that. So I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, because that is partially pigment ink and that does take a while. So once that was done, I cut a banner end on the end of it, and I had cut it down a little bit. It was a little bit too wide. And then I am going to put MFT On Point Precision glue on the back of it. And I did fussy cut those images out. I used a black marker to go around the edges of everything to make sure that the image was, you couldn't see any of the white core of the paper in that. And I think it looks really good against that background. And I'm going to use my glass block to hold that down, and going to run some ATG on the back of that sentiment and stick it down, and then cut off the remaining piece. This doesn't stick at first, so I think because of the gesso, I don't think it stuck. There you go, it came off, and I have to readjust it, and it was in a different place than it was before, but cut it off, and that's where it's going to stay. So I like it, but then I put it under a glass block because I used my ATG and used up the very last of this ATG, not to change the roll. And I put it under a glass block for a little while because it was warped. If you see the paper, you can see how warped it is. I also added some MFT On Point Precision glue to it because of the warping. I figure putting the glass block on top of that would help. And then those little jewels are from the rabbit hole designs, and I thought that it looked very nice with that. They're like the topaz color, and I will come back and put those on later on. So here it is later on, and I put 3 little jewels on. So that will finish off the card. I didn't do anything on the inside. I hope that you guys enjoy this series and you're enjoying hopping along with everybody. There are 7 different artists. There might be 8. There is one woman who can't commit to doing every week, so she will be a bonus contributor. So I hope that you guys are enjoying looking at everybody's blogs, YouTube videos, as well as Instagram. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to leave them below. And if you're not subscribed, please hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you again real soon for another video. Bye!